And with me now, Liberal MP Anthony Housefather, Conservative MP Rachael Thomas, and NDP MP Peter Julian. Hi, everybody. Good to have you here. Thank you very much for making the time on a pretty important subject. Mr. Housefather, I want to start with you. Before we get into what can happen, if anything, what solutions, what remedies should be looked at, Canadians consumed a lot of testimony today that I think would be pretty troubling to many of them. What stood out for you? Like, what was your takeaway from this?
My takeaway is that Hockey Canada has come to the conclusion that they're going to attack the press, they're going to blame everybody else for the troubles that they've had, and they're going to take a very aggressive defense position as is set out in their minutes of August the 2nd, which is what they said they were going to do. And that's what they did today. They didn't acknowledge, I think, responsibility for a lot of things. They defended everything that had been done, even where it was apparent that the actions were completely undefensible. And, you know, it seemed to be that the lack of transparency and the lack of recognition of what they had done incorrectly seemed to predominate.
I know, Ms. Thomas, there was some indication that they would take that kind of defense, but it's almost a bit different when you hear it in person. Were you surprised at all that there was so little admission of wrongdoing?
I think I gave them the benefit of the doubt and thought perhaps after so much coverage and opportunity to listen to Canadians and the concerns that are being expressed by the general public and by the players and by the parents and by the sponsors and, right, it goes on. I thought perhaps this was an opportunity for them to take some ownership and to commit to a full cultural shift. Unfortunately, all we heard today were empty platitudes and a continuation of the secrecy and the cover-up that's been a part of their mode of operation for years.
Mr. Julian, the fact that that occurred, the fact that there was such a low level of responsibility taken at this juncture after so much has been put out there in the public realm, what does it tell you?
Well, it tells me that the federal government needs to take its responsibilities, and I'm gratified that the Minister of Sport has agreed to the NDP push to have a full compliance audit done of Hockey Canada. I mean, it's not just how they treat serious allegations, horrific allegations of sexual violence and sexual abuse. It's also where they are choosing to put their money, and we found out today that championship rings are $3,000 for each time that they're purchased for each member of the board of directors. These are the kinds of expenditures that the hockey parents who scrimp and save to have the money to actually enroll their daughter or son in Hockey Canada programs would just shake their head at. And so Hockey Canada has not proven to understand when the public responds to what we're hearing. And the federal government now has to play its role of responsibility.
So on that subject and what can be done, in particular, what stood out, I think, to many people watching today was the insistence that the leadership would not change, right? That there would not be any kind of major overhaul, because that is something that the Minister of Sport has said explicitly should happen. What should, I mean, if that can't be forced to happen, like what are we left with? What levers do the federal government have at its disposal? What is the government prepared to do?
Well, I think, first of all, our committee has power as well. And I think we could issue a report saying that the management of Hockey Canada has to change before any federal funding resumes. I think the Minister could say that.
Couldn't she just say that right now?
She could. I mean, she could say that. I think the other thing that she has said, which I agree with, is that Hockey Canada needs to change. The board of directors of Hockey Canada is elected by its members. The members can go out there. They have an election coming up in a few weeks, I believe. She talked about it incessantly today, saying, well, all 9 of us are for election. It's funny, you know, she talked about how there could be no disruption, no change, because she didn't want anybody to leave. And then all 9 of them are up for election at exactly the same time. There could be the complete disruption. So in the end result, I think the members need to force them out at this point. That really is what will happen. The board decides who the CEO is. The CEO is not leaving with the current board. The members need to force that out. And I guess the government, as Mr. Julian said, has agreed to a fulsome audit. I think our committee needs to continue its work. And we can put in place, for example, contracts from Sports Canada for funding in the future that put down very specific guidelines as to what federations need to do.
Is it your sense, Ms. Thomas, that that is the case? Like that best route to pursue would be if the members got together and ultimately had their say, and the management or the leadership of this was changed?
I think certainly the the members of the committee have a role to play. So does the government, and of course also the members of the board for Hockey Canada have a role. So let's go through that here for a quick moment. So at the committee level, we have a responsibility to put forward a report with suggestions or recommendations. In addition to that, the board of directors for Hockey Canada has an opportunity for renewal in the coming weeks, and they have a responsibility to hold their highest level accountable, which currently is Scott. And then thirdly, the government has a responsibility to play. When the organization Hockey Canada is failing to hold themselves to account, it is up to the sport minister to do that. And so she has a responsibility, I believe, Canadians believe, to put metrics in place. So not just platitudes, not just words in terms of what she might anticipate, but actual metrics.
Do you mean if funding resumes to attach like strings?
Absolutely,
to it?
absolutely. So put metrics in place so that there is proof that they have been met in order for funding to be resumed. That's an incredibly important mechanism of accountability in this case.
And Mr. Julian, you had talked about the audit that the government has now said that they will perform. What do you hope that accomplishes, and what do you think? What levers would you like to see the government pull?
Well, certainly over the years, we've seen the federal government just providing money to Hockey Canada. I'm glad that has stopped, and I certainly agree with Mr. Housefather that any conditions of restoring funding have to have very, very tight and binding obligations on Hockey Canada's side. As far as the annual general meeting and the current leadership, I was stunned by the board chair speaking as if the only leader, the only CEO that would be possible for Hockey Canada is Mr. Smith. And it's simply not true. There are a myriad of people that are very talented, that love hockey as our national winter sport, that would love to take on the rebuilding of Hockey Canada after this crisis and after its collapse in terms of public confidence. And so there is, I think, real pressure on the small number of people who are on the board of Hockey Canada to actually finally hear the message from hockey parents, from the Canadian public, from us as parliamentarians, and to start to put the change into place that they've been talking about for so long, but have never implemented.
Okay, on that note, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, all three of you, for coming in. Appreciate the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.